Alrighty, so this is live. We're live. Okay, so first encounters. Let's see, where's my Gmail? Okay, there we are, Gmail. Okay. When was the first time you encountered racism? How did you react? How do you react to racism in yourself and in others? Um, yeah. Okay. So when was the first time you guys encountered racism? And I guess I'll start. Um, I don't know if it was the first time that I encountered racism in my life ever. There may have been small things along the way that now, uh, as I'm an adult, I'm kind of going back and look at some stuff. But I think my first time when racism was personal was I was playing basketball with this guy. He was my best friend. His name was Chris, and we were playing basketball. And I was a soccer player, and he was a basketball player. So we would always, and I was, my family was one of the first African American families to move into this neighborhood. Um, we weren't the first, but we were one of the first, and so there wasn't a lot of racial integration in this neighborhood or in the school nearby. Um, so that should give you a little bit of context. But he and I would play basketball. We play 21. We play horse, and we always joked around because I'm this black kid who can't really play basketball well, but I play soccer, and he's this white kid who doesn't play soccer well but plays basketball very, very well. So it's kind of, if you go by racial stereotypes, we were, we were mixed up on what we should be good at. And so he would always beat me in basketball, and we're in his backyard and we're playing, and I finally, one day, I finally beat him. I don't know how this happened, but it's the one time I ever beat him, and he took it away from me. The ball's coming down through the net, and he catches it, and he goes, "Nigger!" And then he turns around and goes,
Wow.
"Oh, oh, 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 I call all my friends that." And I was like, "W- "We we have all the same friends, Chris. I've never heard you say that." And then we kept trying to play. We kept trying to play, but then I just went home. I just went home, and our friendship was never the same after that. Well, our friendship didn't exist after that. We were never friends again. We never hung out again. And I became a manager at a music store a few years later. And he still lived across the street, and he came into the music store a couple years later, and our eyes locked, and we were both in that moment again. Like we were just always stuck there. So that was kind of my first encounter with racism, and it has always made me wonder, despite the relationships with white women that I've been in, despite the friendships I've, it always has made me wonder and have that question in the back of my mind: is this all attestations to the opposite? Um, is this what white people really think of me quietly, or my friends?
I mean, that's really heavy. I think in a lot of ways, what you went through was probably more destructive than anything I have to offer up. For example, um, I mean, just that kind of thing can just sit with you. Mine was, and I feel like that kind of betrayal is just worse. But I don't know. Racism has always been, in terms of my experience with it, a very interesting, confusing, and baffling struggle. Because I feel like I don't fit in very well to how a person of my both ethnic and cultural background is supposed to have experienced it. Um, because my first my experience of racism was mixed with a whole bunch of other bad things. But I think my first tangible thing, which I can point to and say, yeah, for certain that was racism, that wasn't just them being mean, was when the slum kids would throw rocks at me because I was white. And of course, there were always people in Indonesia grabbing at your hair and grabbing at your face because you were white, and they'd never seen sometimes a white person up close, and so they wanted to see what your hair and face felt like. Um, I remember that you always had to be careful around the men that they wouldn't pull your pants down to see if your privates were white. That happened to me more than once. Um, and I mean, but that was always the other people doing it. It wasn't ever my friends doing that. And once they were our friends, they wouldn't act that way anymore. It was just people who weren't friends who would do that. So I don't think even at the time I had a clear idea that it was Indonesians who did that. I had more of an idea that strangers would do that. I didn't realize until later the reason, the reasoning why.
I remember being a kid and hearing a very old member of my family talking and using the N word and saying several things that I remember. Like as a kid, you kind of know like that's a word we shouldn't say, or that's mean. Those are things we shouldn't say, and being upset by it and asking my mom about it later, like why did she say those things? And my mom kind of explaining to me that this person had grown up in a very different time where the world was a very different place than the one I'm growing up in. And just, I guess, that was the first time it ever occurred to me that someone that I loved or someone that I thought was good, and who was good in so many ways, could have such wrong thinking about something else. And I guess my first real encounter with racism would have been that we had an interracial couple start coming to our church, and there was a time in the church where that was it was preached in my church that that was not something that God approved of. And so when this couple came, there was a lot, I wouldn't say that there was anger, but there was a lot of confusion because they were really lovely people. Both of them were great. They were serving in the church. They were so kind. And I remember my uncle who, it was my great uncle, but he was a preacher in Detroit, and they had him come over, and people from the church sat down with him and really had these questions, and my uncle just kind of explaining to them like how wrong their thinking was. And it was funny because I was a kid. I was there kind of like on the side watching, but as he explained to everyone that God wasn't upset by this marriage, he would be more upset about the judgment and prejudice towards the couple, and seeing the relief on everyone's faces because they really so badly wanted to like them and love them and approve of them, and they felt like this obligation to, maybe I'm supposed to have a problem with this. And so when they had a preacher they respected tell them, no, actually, God wants you to love them just like you love everybody else, they were like, okay. And from that, I mean, from my perspective, from that point forward, things were a lot different.
It's always so interesting when you encounter things that are just like you're like, man, like you there are times where you just don't even get mad. You're just like, you're just shocked. Like, oh, really? Oh my, for real? You actually think that? I remember meeting a pastor. I lived in North Carolina for 7 years when my dad got out of the military, and I remember going to this church, and the pastor was a guy who would stand. I mean, obviously he would preach, but after it, he would walk down the aisle with his big King James Version Bible, and he would walk out and stand in the doorway and shake everybody's hands coming out. And I can't remember what context it was that we were in, but he said something to the effect of black people and white people are not supposed to get married in this moment. Maybe my mind's playing tricks on me, but in that moment of like shaking hands and walking out, like I just remember, why is he telling me what? Why am I being told this by the pastor while I'm shaking his hand on my way out to church? But I was just, even as a kid, I was just shocked because my first crush was my best friend's sister. Her name was Becky. She's married to a great guy now. We're still friends to this day, if only on Facebook. But it was just always strange to me that was something that someone believed. And in every other way, you would think that this person is a good Christian person. They love Jesus, they love their family, they serve in the church, and they're racist. And so it's kind of like, wow. And I guess as a black person in this country who's experienced so much at this point, you try to have balance the idea of grace and righteous indignation, and trying to understand this is a time and a place where they came from, but also feeling like you're supposed to speak prophetically to their usurping of scripture and using God to bolster their racism. So it's kind of this weird rock and a hard place that I find myself in when encountering and engaging racism in others.
Yeah, no, I relate. I mean, the way I do it is not exactly charitable. I feel like if by this point you still have insisted on clinging to your cultural heritage and cultural upbringing when it's that self-evidently toxic and destructive, that you have the internet. We have all this information. You can lead a horse to water, you can't make him drink. They're without excuse. And so if it's not affecting people around me, I treat it like the way I would treat any other blistering idiot. I ignore them. But if they're hurting other people, I usually engage in the way to shut them down publicly as fast as possible to show other people that this is folly, this is foolishness, it's not acceptable to talk to other people this way, or to speak publicly about other races this way. And I mean, Calvin, you've seen, I'm very good at making people look like idiots when I want to. And that is what I do. I take, when it says, answer fool according to his folly, lest to think himself wise, it doesn't mean engage the argument. It means there are some kinds of fools where they just need to be not them shown so they know they're fools, so that other people know that they're fools.
I think sometimes people think that as long as they're not saying things to people of other races, or they're not being mean, they're treating everyone nice, a smile on their face, that it's not racism. Then if they, go back home and talk about it, it's like, well, that's just their opinion, so it's not racist. They would never be mean. They treat everyone equally, not understanding that, like the very way of thinking, the very lack of understanding or trying to understand that there are differences in people, and that's part of life. We all have differences. I think it's just putting that barrier up there and being unwilling to see it any other way. And I guess it's really a lack of listening and having an open heart, because I just finished reading The Help, so I had a lot of feelings on the subject.
You was kind. You was good.
You was important.
You was important. Sorry, I forgot the last one, everybody.
You was kind, smart. You was important. But it's such a great book, and I don't know that I necessarily have really really profound thoughts on the subject, but that book definitely brought up a lot of feelings to me, because on both sides of it, and those in the Black community and those in the white community, and the struggles they both had to understand each other, and I just thought it was a wonderful book, and it's so important to listen to each other.
I just finished watching the movie Beyond the Lights, and I also watched the movie Belle, and I also watched Dear White People. All of them deal with racial issues in one way or another. And as you all know from previous podcasts and private conversations we've had offline, race is kind of a big issue for me. But if I'm honest, I mean, it's easy for me to talk about Ferguson. It's easy for me to talk about the guy who owned the Clippers. It's easy for me to talk about any number of issues dealing with race relations in America. It's not as easy to talk about my own racism. Like, I saw the movie Crash, and there were racial stereotypes I had never even heard of. And so it made me more aware of things. And so now, if I'm honest, I don't like Asian female drivers. I don't like it at all. I don't like them at all, and I don't want them on the road. I also don't feel like white people should be adopting black children. I just don't. And here's the thing. I think those things, and I also simultaneously know that those are wrong views to hold. And so now I've got this struggle. It's very easy for me to go, police brutality, racism, Ferguson, horrible, they're terrible. This guy told me I can't date his daughter because I'm black and she's white, and that's not to be, and that's racism. And then I get to myself, and I'm like, I'll see a white parent with a child who otherwise was not going to be adopted, and they're put into a great situation now with these parents, and I'm hung up on the color of their skin. Now there are things to be said about being raised in a culture and understanding culture and all that stuff, but still, love translates beyond culture. But I still have these feelings in myself that I know are absolutely wrong, and I'm not sure what to do with them. I hate that that stuff is in me.
I I don't know what to tell you about that. I won't say that I'm not racist any more than I'll say I'm not prideful or I'm not wrathful. I don't think a person can safely claim the absence of vice. Um, but I don't think that racism is inherent to the human condition. People otherize people. That's inherent to the human condition. How you otherize a person, you always got to be aware of that. Um, but racism specifically, um, I I mean the closest thing which I probably have to racism is if I walk into a room full of a bunch of white Midwesterners who are more or less dressed like me, I feel really out of place. Because I'm not used to being around anything which resembles, um, I guess, I don't even want to call it culture because it's still not my culture. It's like it's wearing a mask which looks like me, and it freaks me out. Um, but that's my third cultureness reacting when I see things here which look like my culture, and I've learned coming back that I'm not really allowed to be part of that. That just looks like me, but it's not me. Um, so I have an aversion to things like that. Um, and I think that in its own way, if I wasn't always trying to be mindful of that and finding ways to engage with people as peers, that would have a lot of control over me, I think. Um, but and so I wouldn't say that otherizing based on another line like race or intellect or class um, is any better or worse. It is, and I think that once you take away some of how I'm just going to use the word demonic, how demonic racism is, instead of how just mundane it is. Once you de-demonify it, it becomes something where, hey, if you otherize people, the question to not otherize them is how do you participate with them? I haven't been able to not otherize people who I wasn't willing to participate with. That's how I am proactive about getting along with conservative evangelical Christians. I'm an evangelical Christian. I think by no means do I fit an American conservative version. I'm a European conservative, um, and it's just you have to be mindful to just keep the doors open, participate in community when you're invited, invite them to be in your community, um, and that's how I do it with other things. It might be harder when it's not cultural though.
I would think, Calvin, that um, if for you to be able to say something like I don't think that a black baby should be raised by a white family, and then in the same breath to say, but I know that's not right thinking that you are in a healthy place, or at least on the path to a healthy place. I think that the dangerous place is to just leave it at that. I think these people shouldn't mix together, and that's that. So screw you, whatever you think. I think to be able to look at it and say, yeah, I think that Asian women are terrible drivers, but you know what? That's probably unfair. There's probably some really good women Asian drivers out there that I need to just relax a little bit. You can't necessarily help your gut reactions to things. I think that's just things that we know, experiences we have might make you predisposed to have some kind of reaction towards the way somebody looks or somebody's neighborhood they grew up in. And so you can take that and then kind of choose to spin it into a healthier, more godly place. Say, okay, so maybe I'm inclined to have this negative reaction towards this group of people, but maybe I should get to know somebody. But,
It's
that might help.
it's almost like there's an insidious side to stereotyping. Like there's good stereotypes and nobody fights them. It's like black people, they're all such good dancers, man. They got soul and rhythm. And look, Asian people, they're so good at math. Look at them go. And Hispanics, man, they're just hard. But then because well, it's okay to positive. Well, now it's okay to stereotype, and so now it's okay for me to go, all Asian female drivers are terrible drivers, if we can even call them drivers. Like, yeah, so that we can start saying stuff like that, right? And I know that that's wrong. Or, oh, all black people are criminals. Like, oh, they're all good dancers. Yeah, that's true. That's great. They're all good dancers. They're all criminals. Well, how do we get from one place to the other? Well, we've said that
My brain's just going with Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal now.
We've said that stereotyping is okay in that respect. And so while I'm not apt to take away good stereotypes because I benefit from some of them, I also see where it has led some of my thinking. And like you said, I think it was Kara. I think Kara said it, where essentially you're not raised in a vacuum. Those views are coming from somewhere. They're coming from outside of yourself. Oh no, it was David. David, you said we're not inherently born this way, and so I don't know where those thoughts come from, and I'm battling against them, and I pray against them. If I think about them. That's the other thing. A lot of people don't think about racism until they're faced with, like, I don't think about bad Asian drivers until I see one, or I get cut off by one, or one drifts over into my lane. I don't think about it. And so I don't think to pray against those kinds of prejudices unless something happens that I don't like.
One thing I have taken to doing the past year, and this is my way of agreeing with you, I'm just going to say positive stereotyping, even though it's positive, is still otherizing. You're taking something other than you and saying these things other than me are this way. And once you start doing it subconsciously, you're going to do it in other ways too. I have found in other areas, particularly related to gender rights, I have found it of absolute paramount to avoid any otherizing statements when describing people who are different than me, and to try to find inclusive statements, because the way you say things really can psychologically affect your thinking patterns. And once you start trying to find other ways to describe women, to describe other cultures, to describe homosexuals, you can kind of start to, by just muscle memory, deprogram some of those instincts, at least those preliminary ones, what comes out of your mouth at least. And then, having friends who are part of those groups, I have some friends who make me, in terms of my stance on women's rights, they make me look extremely mild and moderate. And I think that's great, because there's some things where I just wouldn't have thought that would have been a thing which wasn't okay. A great example this Halloween, there is this PhD sexy Halloween costume. So many sexy Halloween costumes, it never occurred to me that was inherently more offensive, but I found out to many of my friends it was. And my initial reaction was that's actually kind of hot, because I think PhDs are hot. I didn't make the connection that, no, that's actually reducing the value of a PhD to many people. And now that I know that, and I've processed that, I'm going to try to be more careful about how I approach that sort of situation in the future, just verbally.
Do you think there's a way to approach certain stereotypes, and I don't even know if the word is stereotypes, but just things that are associated with certain groups of people in a way that's not offensive?
Yeah. When I feel like, to be completely honest, when I feel like, without exception, every woman I have ever dated has turned out either to be fickle or in some way has deeply betrayed me, and I come out of it with this sense that women don't love women are fickle. That the way in which I process that is not to bottle that up. It's not to go talk to my guy friends about it. It's to go talk to my lady friends about it and say, basically, this is what I'm going through, this is what I'm thinking, this is how I'm feeling. And they help me sort of come back around and understand, things which I've missed. Like, yeah, okay, women do that. No one's denying that women do that. But here's all the ways guys do that too. And then it's sort of like, oh yeah, everyone does that. It even talks about that in the Bible. It's just my experience, because I'm part of this group, just means I've only experienced it from that group. And, with racial stereotypes, a lot of what we associate with the groups is going to come from class. But there's going to be a lot of similar things with that. If you make things about generally people, and then how you personally experience people is going to depend on your point of reference. But being able to, by talking to them, you can bring it back to that point of reference, and you can at least be healthy about it and transparent. Even if it's offensive, having people you trust where you can be transparent with them, I think is a really important step to healing.
I think when working at Disney, there was a time of year when a lot of Brazilians would come to the park, and it was kind of like well known that the Brazilians in mass, usually lots of young children, most of them don't speak English, and it was just kind of like it was hectic. It was just a hectic season in life, and so we kind of got to this point like, oh no, Brazilians are coming, and in hindsight, I was like, that probably wasn't like PC to like talk about, but and talking to another friend from who I went on a mission trip to Australia with, who was saying, well, do you remember our experience going to Australia, and that our team was really loud and laughing a lot, and we were really stereotypically American when we were there, and all the time we got shushed on the train multiple times, and it was very interesting to see, like I was definitely fitting into an American stereotype while I was there, and I just thought it was interesting.
Well, I think we'll cut it off there. I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems, obviously. But thank you guys for hopping on.
Yeah, for sure.
On a Tuesday night to do this. Can you guys hear that thing dinging?
Nope.
I don't hear
Awesome, good, because I don't think it's going to make it into the recording. It's.
Hear now.
You can hear that?
I hear that.
I couldn't hear it during the show though. I only just now heard it.
Okay, I'm hoping it didn't catch in the recordings because it's really driving me insane. It keeps asking me to upgrade in the middle of the podcast. I'm like, I can't upgrade because it's going to shut off the podcast. Hold on one sec. Could I have done it? I don't know. Upgrade now. Just upgrade. Install the plugin. Good grief. Okay, there it goes. This is driving me insane. I don't know what's going on here. Either way, we're all done. Thank you guys. I was telling Kara that we will obviously not record this upcoming Sunday, and we will not record the Sunday after. So there will be a week where there is no podcast. It'll be the 1 week hiatus. But then the next time when we get together, we'll record either 3 or 4, and that'll take care of everything until the new year.
Sounds good.
All righty?
All right.
Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you guys later.